how did you get involved with this American family Christian movie that it was made by homeschoolers? I can't imagine that was the thing that you were like, hey, I got to make a film done by a couple of guys who were homeschoolers.
Well, you make it sound a little bit more radical than it was. The truth of the matter is I like independent films and I like independent filmmakers.
Mm-hmm.
And you can get great production values out of Hollywood, but you seldom really get something where people are trying to talk from the heart. And, I'm in this paradoxical situation of being, I suppose, a radical and a skeptic and a rationalist, really. But I have an enormous number of Christian friends who put up with me rather well, and I have an enormous sympathy for them. And right at the moment, I'm one of those who actually believes that we're in danger of losing Western European Christian civilization, and now is not the time to bicker. Now is the time to find what we have in common.
Holy cow!
And build bridges rather than sneer and scoff and scorn.
John, you're speaking to an audience of 10 million people here in America that feel exactly the same way, that we're in real trouble, and nobody's willing to say it. Nobody's willing to do it. And the religious people and really some of the atheists too, we're just tearing each other apart. And we have a lot we agree on. I have good friends with Penn Jillette, who's a big atheist here in America. And, we get along famously. And because there's so much to agree on, the basic principles of life and Western civilization, and we really are on the verge of losing it.
Well, I think America is still the last best hope of mankind, but I think we really are going to lose it in Europe.
When's the last time you were here? We're not doing so well.
I lived in the States. Incidentally, I used to listen and watch your show whenever I got back to the States.
Oh, you're kidding.
But here in Europe, the demographics have just been ignored by the politicians, and I'm not a statistician or anything like that, but
right.
when you have contraception in a country for 40 or 50 years, and your birth rate goes below that magical 2.1 per woman figure on average, you get a declining population. And what we are doing, we're not merely replacing our indigenous European population with refugees from Africa and the Third World. We're actually replacing the culture as well, and that is catastrophic. I grew up in Africa. I was taught to respect Islam. All those customs, that Muslims must abjure, I was aware of, and would try and observe. I have let's put it this way. I have many friends of mine who are Muslim, but I would not wish to live in an Islamic world or an Islamic country. And it isn't a question of finding similarities. There is in Islam a direct confrontational attitude towards the unbelievers, and it's really set in stone, because the Prophet was the last person that God talked to as a prophet. Therefore, everything he says is set in stone. You cannot contradict the Prophet. And some of the things that the Prophet said, though you will always find people saying, well, he didn't actually mean this. What it really means is, but it is really there, and I'm one of those people who've got a particular bee in my bonnet about slavery. The reason is simple. I grew up in Africa. My father was a policeman. He came home one day. We went at lunchtime, and he said, "Get in the car." And he drove me down to the dockside in Dar es Salaam, and there was an Arab dhow in the harbor. And he said, "You see that dhow? Twice a year it comes down from Saudi Arabia. It stops in Aden. It comes down the Somali coast. It stops here. It's bringing trading goods down, and then it goes on to Beira in Mozambique. And on the way back up, it's always got 2 or 3 little black boys, and they are being taken back to Saudi Arabia as slaves."
Oh my gosh.
And his anger was palpable and communicated itself to me, and I've always been. You know when people have a little bee in their bonnet about things, and you say, "Oh, that's odd, but a little bit out of place." That's was one of my bees in my bonnet.
Well,
And I'm outraged. I'm outraged to see justifications for slavery again